January 22nd, 1989. Super Bowl 23. The San Francisco 49ers versus the Cincinnati Bengals. 3 minutes and 10 seconds left on the clock. The Bengals lead 16-13. The 49ers have the ball on their own 8-yard line, 92 yards from the end zone, 92 yards from a championship, and the entire stadium is panicking, everybody except one man. Joe Montana walked into the huddle. His teammates were tense. The pressure was suffocating. This was the Super Bowl. This was everything. And you know what Joe Montana did? He looked up into the stands, pointed, and said, "Hey, isn't that John Candy?" The comedian, sitting in the crowd. Montana spotted a celebrity in the middle of the biggest moment of his career and decided to make small talk about it. His teammates stared at him, and then they started laughing. The tension broke, just like that, because Joe Montana didn't feel pressure the way other human beings feel pressure. He was wired differently. Something in his brain turned chaos into calm. What happened next is one of the greatest drives in the history of professional football. 11 plays, 92 yards. Montana completed 8 of 9 passes on that drive. He moved the 49ers down the field with surgical precision. And with 34 seconds left on the clock, he threw a 10-yard touchdown pass to John Taylor. 49ers win, 20-16. Joe Montana wins his 3rd Super Bowl, and the legend of Joe Cool became permanent. But here's what you need to understand. That drive wasn't a fluke. That wasn't a lucky quarter. That was a pattern. Joe Montana did this over and over and over again for his entire career. When the game was on the line, when the pressure was at its highest, when other quarterbacks crumbled, Joe Montana elevated. He pulled off the impossible so many times that people stopped being surprised by it. They just expected it, and he always delivered. Joe Montana grew up in New Eagle, Pennsylvania, a small town about 30 miles south of Pittsburgh. He was a Western Pennsylvania kid through and through. Tough, competitive. Football was in his blood. He played at Ringgold High School, where he was a standout quarterback and also played basketball. He was good enough to get recruited by some of the biggest programs in the country, and he chose Notre Dame. At Notre Dame, Montana wasn't an immediate star. He bounced between the starting lineup and the bench. Injuries slowed him. Inconsistency frustrated coaches. But when the moment was big enough, something changed in Joe Montana. Something activated, and the first time the entire country saw it was January 1st, 1979. The Cotton Bowl, Notre Dame versus Houston. The weather in Dallas was brutal. An ice storm had hammered the city. Wind chills were well below freezing, and Joe Montana had the flu. He could barely stand. Notre Dame fell behind. By the 4th quarter, Houston led 34-12. The game was over. Montana had gone back to the locker room, shivering and dehydrated. The medical staff covered him in blankets and fed him chicken soup. Chicken soup in the middle of a bowl game. And then he came back out, and what happened next defied all logic. Montana led Notre Dame to 23 points in the 4th quarter. 23 points against a team that had dominated the entire game. The final score was 35-34. Notre Dame won. Joe Montana, the kid who could barely walk at halftime, had just led one of the greatest comebacks in college football history. The chicken soup game, that's what they call it. And it was the first time America learned that Joe Montana had a gift that couldn't be measured by statistics. The 1979 NFL Draft. The San Francisco 49ers selected Joe Montana in the 3rd round, the 82nd overall pick. 81 players were taken before him. 81. Nobody thought he was a franchise quarterback. He wasn't big enough. His arm wasn't strong enough. He didn't have the prototypical size that scouts drooled over. 6'2", 200 pounds. In an era when the ideal quarterback was supposed to be 6'4" with a cannon arm. Joe Montana threw a football that looked like it floated. Soft spirals that didn't have the zip of a Dan Marino fastball. Scouts saw weakness. Bill Walsh saw a weapon. Walsh had just been hired as the 49ers head coach, and he was building something nobody in football had seen before. The West Coast offense, short, precise passes, timing routes. A system that required a quarterback with intelligence, accuracy, and the ability to make quick decisions under pressure. It didn't require a rocket arm. It required a surgeon. And Joe Montana was the most accurate passer Bill Walsh had ever seen. Montana became the full-time starter in 1980. His first 2 years were solid, but not spectacular. The 49ers were building, learning Walsh's system, developing chemistry. And then came 1981, the season that changed everything. The 49ers went 13-3 that year. Montana threw for 3,565 yards and 19 touchdowns. Good numbers, but the numbers don't tell you what Montana was really doing. He was executing Walsh's offense with a level of precision that defenses had never seen. Short passes turned into long gains because the timing was perfect. Montana would release the ball before the receiver made his break, trusting that the receiver would be exactly where he was supposed to be. And they always were, because Montana put the ball exactly where it needed to go, every single time. But the moment that defined Joe Montana forever happened on January 10th, 1982, the NFC Championship game, the San Francisco 49ers versus the Dallas Cowboys. Candlestick Park. If you were alive and watching football that day, you remember exactly where you were. The Cowboys were the dynasty, America's team. They had dominated the NFC for a decade. The 49ers were the upstarts, young, talented, but unproven on the biggest stage. And with less than a minute left in the game, the 49ers were losing, 27-21. Montana had the ball on his own 11-yard line, 89 yards to go, the season on the line. Montana drove the 49ers down the field, play after play. When the pocket collapsed, he scrambled. When the coverage tightened, he found the open man. The Cowboys' defense was one of the best in football. Too Tall Jones, Harvey Martin, Randy White, they were coming for Montana on every snap. The noise at Candlestick Park was deafening, and Montana just kept moving the chains. And then, with 58 seconds left, the 49ers had the ball near the Cowboys' goal line. Third down. Montana took the snap, rolled right, and the Cowboys' defense collapsed the pocket. He was running out of room, running out of time. He should have thrown the ball away. Any other quarterback would have thrown the ball away. Instead, Montana threw a high pass toward the back of the end zone. Too high, it seemed. Way too high. But Dwight Clark leaped. He extended his arms to their absolute limit. His fingertips found the football, and he caught it. Touchdown. The catch. The most famous play in San Francisco 49ers history. Maybe the most famous play in NFL history. 28-27. The 49ers win. They go to the Super Bowl. The Dallas Cowboys dynasty was over. A new era had begun, and the man at the center of it was a third-round draft pick that nobody thought was good enough. 2 weeks later, Montana won Super Bowl 16 against the Cincinnati Bengals, 26-21. Montana threw for 157 yards and a touchdown, completing 14 of 22 passes with 0 interceptions. He was named Super Bowl MVP. The kid from New Eagle, Pennsylvania, the third-round pick, was a champion. But that was just the beginning, because Joe Montana was about to do something that very few quarterbacks in history have done. He got better. Super Bowl 19, January 20th, 1985. The 49ers versus the Miami Dolphins. Dan Marino's Dolphins. The same Dan Marino who had just thrown 48 touchdowns. The most prolific passer in NFL history at that point. And Joe Montana outplayed him so thoroughly that it was almost embarrassing. Montana threw for 331 yards and 3 touchdowns. He ran for 59 more. The final score was 38-16. It wasn't competitive. Montana won his second Super Bowl MVP. 4 years later, Super Bowl 23, the 92-yard drive, the John Candy moment, the Taylor touchdown, third Super Bowl, another masterpiece under pressure. And then came Super Bowl 24, January 28th, 1990, the 49ers versus the Denver Broncos. This wasn't a game. This was a coronation. Joe Montana threw for 297 yards and 5 touchdowns. 5. He completed 22 of 29 passes with 0 interceptions. His passer rating for that game was 147.6. The 49ers won 55-10. The most lopsided Super Bowl in history at that time. Montana won his 3rd Super Bowl MVP award. Let those numbers sink in for a moment. 4 Super Bowls, 4 wins, 4-0. 3 Super Bowl MVP awards. In those 4 Super Bowls combined, Joe Montana completed 83 of 122 passes for 1,142 yards, 11 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. 0. He never threw an interception in a Super Bowl. Not once. a combined passer rating of 127.8 across 4 championship games. That's not just good, that's the most clutch performance by any athlete in any sport in the history of American professional sports. For his career, Joe Montana threw for 40,551 yards and 273 touchdowns. He was a 2-time NFL MVP in 1989 and 1990. Back-to-back MVP awards. He was selected to 8 Pro Bowls. He finished his career with a passer rating of 92.3, which was the highest in NFL history when he retired. He led the NFL in completion percentage 5 times. 5! Nobody was more accurate, nobody made fewer mistakes, and nobody was better when the game was on the line. Montana's fourth-quarter comeback numbers are almost hard to believe. He engineered 31 fourth-quarter comebacks during his career. 31 times he walked into the huddle when his team was losing in the fourth quarter, and 31 times he found a way to win. That's not luck, that's not a system, that's a man who refused to let the moment be bigger than him. But the statistics, as impressive as they are, don't capture what made Joe Montana special. His teammates will tell you the same thing. It wasn't the arm, it wasn't the legs, it was the calm, the preternatural, almost eerie calm that he brought to every huddle, every drive, every impossible moment. Ronnie Lott, one of the hardest hitters in NFL history, said that playing with Montana gave you a feeling that you could never lose. That no matter how bad things looked, Montana would find a way. And he always did. Bill Walsh called him the greatest quarterback he ever coached. Jerry Rice, the greatest receiver who ever lived, said Montana was the best he ever played with. These aren't casual compliments. These are legends of the game telling you that Joe Montana was different, that he operated on a level that other quarterbacks simply couldn't reach. Compare Montana to today's game, and the debate gets heated. Patrick Mahomes has the arm talent and the improvisation. Tom Brady has the championships and the longevity. But neither of them ever went 4 for 0 in Super Bowls without throwing an interception. Neither of them had a 127.8 passer rating across 4 championship games. Montana's sample size in the biggest moments is perfect. Literally perfect. He never lost a Super Bowl. He never even came close to losing one, except for that 92-yard drive against Cincinnati. And even that, he won. Montana's time in San Francisco ended when Steve Young took over as the starter. Injuries had slowed Montana, and the 49ers made the difficult decision to let him go. He spent his final 2 seasons with the Kansas City Chiefs in 1993 and 1994. And even there, even at the end, he showed flashes of the magic. In his first season with the Chiefs, he led them to the AFC Championship game. He was 37 years old, playing in a new city with new teammates in a new system, and he still made it to the conference championship, because that's what Joe Montana did. He won, he was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2000, first ballot, no debate, no hesitation. If you watch Joe Montana play, you remember the calm, that almost supernatural ability to slow the game down when everything around him was chaos. You remember the catch. You remember the chicken soup at Notre Dame. You remember the John Candy moment in the Super Bowl. You remember a quarterback who treated the biggest games in football history like they were Tuesday afternoon practices, who threw the ball with the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of a man who already knew how the story was going to end. They called him Joe Cool, but that nickname doesn't capture the full picture. Joe Montana wasn't just cool, he was impossible. He pulled off things that other quarterbacks couldn't dream of, in moments where other quarterbacks couldn't breathe. 4 Super Bowls, 4 wins, 0 interceptions, a combined passer rating that might never be matched. That's Joe Montana, the greatest clutch performer in the history of the National Football League. The man who pulled off the impossible every single time it mattered. Hit subscribe for more breakdowns of the legends who built this game. Next week, we're covering the most dangerous athlete to ever play 2 professional sports at the same time. A man whose speed and power defied human logic. You won't want to miss it.